Hello, and welcome to Pandora Astrology's All Signs Horoscope for September 2024. I'm Jamie Kale Miller. I'm an astrologer in private practice in San Francisco Bay Area since 1992, and there are several things I want to tell you about today. I'm going to tell you about Uranus going retrograde this month and how that feels to you if you're having a Uranus transit this year. Then I'm going to talk about Pluto traveling back into Capricorn this month and finishing up this sign finally after spending 15 years traveling through it. Then I'll talk about this month's lunar eclipse in Pisces, and I'll connect that to Neptune, which is a central feature in this eclipse, and also back to Pluto and Uranus. Along the way, I'll tell you which signs need to watch out for which transits, and I'll show you the birthdays that will be the most strongly affected. Wherever your own sun sign appears, you want to pay attention to what I'm saying. But if your birthday appears, then you really want to listen to my advice closely because it's meant for you very specifically, and it's highly likely you will be feeling the transit I'm telling you about. I'll let you know when to watch out for these influences, best ways to respond, and also some trigger dates when certain challenging or supportive events might happen and how to use them to your advantage. Okay, let's get started. I want to begin with Uranus because on September 1st, Uranus goes retrograde. This happens every year. It's a particular point in Uranus's yearly rhythm where Uranus has been proceeding forward. We call that direct motion. And Uranus slows down, comes to a stop, and that's in apparent motion in our skies, and then begins moving backwards. So this is called a station. Uranus stations retrograde. That's what we call it. And the day that any planet stations and turns retrograde has its own particular feel. It's this feeling of being stopped short in your tracks. Uranus has something he's trying to accomplish. He wants to move forward and do his thing, but he's been stopped in his tracks. So, what's the nature of Uranus? What is it that he's trying to accomplish? And how would you know if it's affecting you? Uranus is the rebel and revolutionary, the change maker, the activist, the humanitarian, scientist, experimenter, progressive futurist, crazy genius, and innovator in all of us. So Uranus is always trying to introduce new wacky ideas, change people's minds, and shift that paradigm. Uranus transits are often attended by a feeling of restlessness and agitation, a readiness for change to happen, and maybe just feeling irritated that it hasn't happened yet, or wondering, why am I blocked? And that feeling would be pretty strong on the day that Uranus goes retrograde. So if you've been having these feelings, like agitation and rebellion, and like you just kind of want to break something, maybe you want to quit your job, maybe you want to end a relationship, maybe something unexpected happens to you in one of those ways, like suddenly you're being downsized and you did not see that coming, or somebody just broke up with you, some kind of radical shift like that that you didn't expect can be the signal of a Uranus transit. And if you are having a Uranus transit and you are feeling those things, then this month, especially the beginning of the month, is going to feel like a big blockage is happening, a big obstacle in your path, and like you just want to tear it apart and break right through it. And let's take a look at birthdays affected by Uranus this year. Which signs will feel this? All of the fixed signs will feel this. Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, if this is your sign, you're going to feel this transit. But if your birthday is here, especially, you will feel this transit because you're definitely having a Uranus transit to your sun. So if you were born May 13th to the 18th of any year at all, August 15th to the 20th, November 14th to 19th, or February 11th to 16th, you will feel this transit. But I want to let you know that even if your birthday is not listed here, you might be feeling this transit. It might be that you're having this transit, it's just not to your sun, but it's to something different in your chart, like your moon or your ascendant. So if you're feeling this transit based on my description of it, then you should take my advice because you're feeling it and really you're the one who knows, right? You know your life. So if you are feeling those ways, that agitation, that rebellion, that reactivity, or if unexpected things are happening, and you just wonder why you didn't even see that thing coming, then you probably are having a Uranus transit this year, whether it's to your sun or not. And I have some suggestions about how to handle it. First of all, don't burn everything down just to make a change. Be careful about reacting and overreacting. And ask yourself how you might look outside of your usual mental box for an answer that might be new, that might solve the puzzle, and might involve thinking in a very different way about it. There's no reason to fear a change if you're the one who initiated it and you're the one who's behind it, driving it. Sometimes all you need to get a different result is to look at something from a different angle. And Uranus is the master of that. If you are feeling Uranus transit this year, there will be dates peppered throughout the month when a faster moving trigger planet, such as Mercury, Venus, or the Sun, will activate the Uranus transit even further. A trigger can introduce added stress that you can learn to turn to your advantage, or a trigger can act as a support mechanism, helping you in ways you might not even notice unless you were looking for it. And that's really the value of a horoscope right there, knowing what to look for. Here are the trigger dates for Uranus this month. Mercury connects with Uranus as a stressor during September 2nd through September 8th. This means that Mercury is going to be triggering Uranus through typically Mercury ways, such as conversations, communications, also ideas, thinking, thought processes. Now, Uranus and Mercury have kind of a special relationship because they're both air planets ruling air signs. Uranus and Mercury, even when they get together in a stressful way, can really make your mind pop. You might find during these dates, September 2nd to 8th, that you get a lot of ideas, maybe some weird ideas, maybe some, outside the box ideas, ideas that you didn't expect, maybe more ideas than you really needed. And some of them might be a little too weird and edgy, but this could be a really a powerful brainstorming period for you, these dates here. Now, mid-month, the sun acts as a support to this Uranus transit. That means that the sun is harmoniously placed relative to Uranus. And the sun is all about the nourishing power of attention. It's also about leadership, being shiny, and also shining the light of your attention on other people. So when the sun gets involved as a trigger planet, you could take either path. You can use that as an opportunity to take some leadership, and that might come pretty easily if the sun is triggering Uranus in a supportive way. Or you can use this as an opportunity to put some positive attention on other people that you're connected with, and by really noticing them, help to smooth things along. Now, we know that Uranus is out to shift your mind around, change your perspective, offer new and sometimes startling ideas and changes. And the sun can really help by having you come off as a shiny leader during these dates, September 14th to the 20th, or by you relating warmly with the leaders in your life. So, for example, let's say somewhere in that date span, September 14th to 20th, somebody comes to you with a really great idea that is a little edgy and different, but fits well with some project that you're working on. You can shine the light of your attention on that person, really notice them and be really warm with them, and give them praise and acknowledgement for the idea that they've brought you. The thing about these supportive trigger transits is they're so smooth that you might not notice them unless you're looking. And if you're watching this horoscope right now, you have the opportunity to put these dates in your calendar and be on the lookout for nice things to happen that you can then grow and expand on, and that can really smooth your path. Now, the Mercury one here, later in the month, September 21st to 25th, another supportive trigger, but this time it's Mercury, where Mercury was stressful in the beginning of the month. At the end of the month, Mercury moves on into a supportive position relative to Uranus. So This one is not likely to be characterized by ideas that are quite so disruptive, invasive, difficult to understand or communicate, or difficult to accept, the way you might notice happening in September 2nd to 8th. This one is more like, wow, it was just that easy conversation that I had, and so many great ideas came from it. And I felt like our brains were popping together, and it was a great brainstorming session that we had there. So, obviously, if you do want to have brainstorming sessions, or you do want to check with somebody in your life about a change that you want to make, use these dates. Have those conversations during these dates and plan to handle them in the ways that I've described and watch for a positive outcome. Remember, you can feel this even if your birth date is not listed here. And if you do feel it, go with your gut and use my advice as needed. Next thing I want to show you is that Pluto is already retrograde, and this month moves back into Capricorn for the final time. Pluto is back in Capricorn for a brief visit and for the last time. Pluto has spent 15 years in Capricorn and is going to be back in Capricorn for just about 2.5 months. Pluto will turn direct on October 11th in Capricorn and then finally leave this sign for good on November 19th. What has Pluto done while in Capricorn? Pluto is the transformer. Transforms, metamorphoses, brings a death and rebirth experience to whatever sign he's traveling through. Capricorn is the sign of authority. So Pluto has been really, really busy transforming the nature of authority. Pluto has brought a lot of tests to people to see if they can discern the difference between authoritative and authoritarian. Pluto's been traveling through Capricorn since 2008, off and on. And in this 15-year time period, we have seen the rise of authoritarian regimes around the world. And so we've seen Pluto's influence quite a bit in government, in corporations, and it hasn't been pretty. A lot of corruption has come up to the surface. Pluto is very, very good at bringing the bad stuff to the surface so that it can be released, and has been doing that very actively with Capricorn themes in the last 15 years. How does this feel if you're having it? If you are having a Pluto transit to anything in your chart this year, it feels like being put through a long, dark night of the soul. It feels really intense. It often feels really emotional. You can find yourself quite despondent, gloomy, cynical, feeling heavy, feeling like you have to go into the sub basement of your soul and wrestle with your own demons. And you may be facing an addiction or other form of compulsion that you are wrestling with as well. So Pluto is arguably the heaviest of the heavy when it comes to transits that we can experience. And I think it's a relief for Capricorns everywhere that Pluto is finally getting ready to leave your sign. But also because Capricorn is a cardinal sign and it squares Libra and Aries and opposes Cancer, if you have anything at all in your chart in 29 degrees of those signs, you will also experience a lot of relief when Pluto moves on for good in November. And even though you might not be a Capricorn, but one of these other signs, you still may be going through some pretty deep transformations of your own. And so it's with great gladness that I tell you that this is going to be over soon. You're going to be emerging from the dark tunnel very soon and back out into the light. Now let's talk about the birthdays affected by Pluto this year. Which signs will feel this? All the cardinal signs, Capricorn, Aries, Cancer, and Libra. And the fixed signs too, Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio, because Pluto is moving back and forth this year between the end of a cardinal sign and the beginning of a fixed sign. But especially if your birthday falls in the dates listed here, you are really going to feel this, and you're definitely having a Pluto transit to your sun this year. So if you were born between January 19th and 23rd, You are definitely having a Pluto transit this year, and you'll feel this. If you were born between April 18th and 22nd, the same, July 21st to 25th, October 22nd to 25th. And I want to say this again, even if your birthday is not listed on this page, you might well be feeling this transit. You might feel a little bit lost in the darkness. You might feel as if Pluto has kidnapped you to his underworld. You might feel gloomy. You might feel vulnerable. You might feel powerless. And if you do feel those ways, and I'm going to describe it a little bit more in a minute, but if you do feel those ways, then you probably are having a Pluto transit this year. It's just possibly not to your sun, or it might be to something different in your chart. So how does that feel? It feels pretty icky. It feels pretty heavy. It feels pretty intense. There's a strong feeling of vulnerability that comes with it. And you can feel that you're going through a change, but you don't really know what it is. You don't know what you're turning into. A lot of uncertainty can fill you during a Pluto transit. And so how do you handle it? Well, you trust your own process of change. You trust your greater self's plan for you. You allow pain and even trauma to surface and be released and let go of, and allow it to be purged from your system. You face your addictions, your compulsions. You face what you do to cope in those moments of vulnerability. And you learn to master your own psychology instead of being driven by compulsions or even instincts. Now I'm going to show you the trigger planets for Pluto this month. As I said before, trigger planets can show up during the course of a month that can trigger the transit and just bring it up more and kind of put it more in your face. And sometimes those triggers may feel positive and supportive, like they're helping you to cope with the transit, and other times they will activate you even further and stress you out even more. And it's about knowing when these triggers are coming and how to respond to them. Here are the trigger dates for Pluto this month. Pluto's trigger dates this month are all happening in the second half of the month. They include the lunar eclipse, which is happening September 15th to the 18th. Those dates will look familiar when we get to the lunar eclipse section of this horoscope, and I will say more about that there. The sun also acts as a support to this Pluto transit during September 16th to the 22nd. And I talked about the sun in the Uranus section a minute ago. When the sun acts as a trigger planet, it brings the light of your high quality attention to that arena. Now, the sun and Pluto are kind of odd bedfellows because Pluto is very secretive and mysterious and really likes to hide in a black box behind a very opaque shield. But the sun is all about making things visible and bringing them into the light of consciousness. So these dates could be really good for shining the light of consciousness on your own internal process of change, even perhaps showing your vulnerability to those that you trust and letting them in on what you're going through so that they can help, they can support you, and they can shine some of the light of their own positive attention on you while you go through these, what might be death throes and really deep changes. I did also say in the Uranus section that supportive transits, we sometimes don't notice them. They're so smooth that it's not like they give us a jab in the ribs to remind us that they're there. They can help, though. It just pays to know which dates they're happening so that you can be deliberate about using the influence to your benefit. Venus connects with Pluto as a stressor during September 18th to 23rd. Venus will bring in relationship, partnership, mirroring, potentially collaboration, connection, diplomacy. So these Venus trigger dates could bring you into dialogue with somebody that you're close to who can reflect and mirror back to you what you're going through in a way that can be useful. Now, this is a stressful trigger, which suggests that this kind of dialogue or mirroring could be not what you want to hear in the moment, not what you want your attention brought to in the moment. And it could come from somebody really close to you, somebody who knows you really well, like a partner, a spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, bestie. And yet, if you're open to the mirroring, it can turn out to be exactly the reflection that you needed. And finally, on September 22nd to 27th, Mercury acts as a support to this Pluto transit. Mercury, of course, brings in communication, also ideas, thinking, learning, research. And when Mercury acts as a supportive trigger, sometimes it's so smooth and easy that it wouldn't occur to you that you need to pay attention, but you do. And these can be the magical moments in which the idea or the communication happened that facilitated and smoothed your process. Maybe just a simple conversation with somebody who's been where you are and who encourages you while you're in your own space of darkness. It can be a conversation with somebody that you really trust and feel really good about talking about this with, somebody that you feel comfortable sharing your deep, dark secrets with. And like I always like to say about harmonious transits involving Pluto, there can be a transformation and it doesn't even have to hurt. Remember, you can feel this even if your birth date is not one of those listed here. And if you do feel it, just know that something in your chart is responding to Pluto, and it might not be your sun, but what you're feeling is based in something real. Now let's dig into this lunar eclipse, which has some interesting connections to Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus. This is a lunar eclipse in Pisces, which means an eclipse of the moon, and it's happening on September 17th. Here are the deets on this eclipse. I'm going to tell you these things briefly because there's more depth of information about these eclipses in my news video about the autumn 2024 eclipses. First thing I want to say is it's a lunar eclipse. That means it's going to be emotional in its nature. It can stir up really powerful emotions. Secondly, it's a partial eclipse, meaning that it's only kind of medium, not very strong, really, kind of weak actually in its potency. So even if it lands with you specifically, it's not as powerful as if it was a full-on total eclipse. And thirdly, it's happening at the North Node, which means this is an initializing eclipse. And that suggests that how you respond to this eclipse will have implications in the future in this life and may even carry forward into the next life or even beyond that. Fourthly, it has a very strong connection to Neptune and some beautiful harmony with Pluto and with Uranus. The Neptune connection is super strong because this is a lunar eclipse in Pisces, which is the sign that Neptune rules. It's very dreamy, very imaginative, but also kind of boundaryless, wifty and spacey, chaotic and messy. And the presence of Neptune only intensifies those qualities. There's a very strong duality in this eclipse between the moon in Pisces and the sun in Virgo, which can come off as bringing this judgmental vibe in opposition or in counterpoise to that spacey, drifty, floaty Pisces moon. But there is beautiful harmony and help available from Pluto and Uranus. Pluto brings in transformational themes that say that this eclipse can bring about a very big change for the better, a release, a letting go of old baggage that you have that you didn't even know that you had and that you really don't need anymore. And it doesn't even have to hurt to let go of it. That's a really great result to get from an eclipse. And the Uranus part is about opening yourself up to new ideas, new approaches, new ways to solve the puzzles that this eclipse presents. Definitely beware of your emotions during this eclipse because it does stir up emotions quite a bit. And think carefully before you react or overreact to those emotions. Now, who's going to feel this eclipse? Certainly people with their sun in a mutable sign, meaning Pisces, but also Virgo, Gemini, and Sagittarius. Mutable folks will feel it, and these birthdays most especially. because if your birthday is here, this eclipse will feel particularly personal and probably intense for you. So think of these as the center points of a date span, centering on March 15th, but up to 5 days before and up to 5 days after, with March 15th as the red hot center of the target. So the closer your birthday is to March 15th, the more potently this eclipse is going to affect you. You could have your birthday on March 10th and still feel this eclipse, but not quite as potently. And so that rule applies to all the other dates shown here as well. March 15, June 16, September 17, December 16. Remember, though, that even if your birthday is not listed here and doesn't fall into the 10-day date span surrounding these dates, you might still feel this transit affecting something else in your chart other than your sun. And if you do notice interesting events swirling around you during this eclipse, then it's extremely likely that it has indeed hit something in your chart. Now, I want to point out that because of Neptune being so involved with this eclipse, the eclipse is therefore itself a trigger event for everyone who's having a Neptune transit this year. Neptune transits feel like times when you feel like you're in a mystery. You may feel a lot of confusion. Things may seem muddy and unclear. You can lose your sense of orientation or direction. And you may feel like you're caught in a holding pattern, like you're just going through the motions and you don't know why you do the things you do in your life. And you're kind of looking for a North Star, something to guide you and lend meaning to your life again. Now, a Neptune transit is classic for being a time when you shouldn't really take powerful actions. Sometimes it really is best to just wait and see during your Neptune transit. Wait for things to clarify. And that can be really hard on some of us who don't like to sit on our hands, but sometimes it's the best approach. Another really good approach to a Neptune transit is to go on some form of retreat. Find or make for yourself a haven, an oasis where you can be alone, where you can rest, have solitude, contemplate, and feel into things without the pressure of the everyday world. Another really great approach to Neptune transits is sleep. Getting good quality sleep can really help you get through a Neptune transit. Now, this Neptune transit impacts all of the mutable signs, of course. So that does mean Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, and Sagittarius, but most particularly folks with these birthdays in those signs. If your birthday is here, you are definitely having a Neptune transit to your sun this year. If you are a Pisces, you would definitely be feeling it, but especially if you were born March 17th to 20th. If you're a Gemini, born June 18th to the 20th. If you're a Virgo, September 19th to the 22nd. And if you're a Sagittarius, born December 18th to the 21st, you would be feeling a Neptune transit this year. And as I've been saying all along, even if your birthday is in Pisces, but not specifically in these dates, you might still be feeling this transit, just not to your sun. You can find out exactly what area of your life is being affected and how to handle it in a reading. Along with that, you get the very specific timing of your Neptune transit, which can be super helpful because Neptune transits feel like they go on forever. And you can get a lot of relief from knowing when it's going to end. You can find a link for a reading in the description below. Eclipses are pretty pointed and potent, but also brief. Then they will usually have an after echo at the same kind of moon 3 months later. Their effects end at the next eclipse that replaces them, and that happens 6 months after. So we usually have 2 eclipse seasons every year, with a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse in each season. The lunar eclipse resets the vibe set by the previous lunar eclipse 6 months before, and the solar eclipse resets the previous solar eclipse. And the lunar eclipse being a full moon, you'll feel the after echo during the full moon 3 months later. And the solar eclipse being a new moon, you'll feel the after echo at the new moon 3 months later. So you're going to feel this lunar eclipse briefly, over about 4 days, from as early as 2 days before, around the 15th, and it will peak on the 17th, then fade during the next day, the 18th. The more precise an eclipse is for you by hitting the center of the birthday target I mentioned, the more likely it is to be accompanied by dramatic and memorable events, whether internal and emotional or external events in terms of behavior. Now, this lunar eclipse is itself a trigger transit, as I mentioned before. Because this eclipse includes some lovely harmony with Pluto and with Uranus, if you're having a transit of either of those this year, you might experience this eclipse in a helpful, supportive way. For example, this eclipse could help you with your Pluto transit. So if you are in that long, dark night of the soul, this eclipse could stir your emotional center and bring up some emotions that need to be purged so that you can release the baggage that Pluto is trying to help you be rid of. And this eclipse could help you with your Uranus transit. If you are trying to make a really big change, a really big conceptual shift, because Uranus is pressing you to make a breakthrough, this eclipse could again stir that emotional pot and help that idea to emerge that can shift your mind, shift your way of thinking, and bring in a change of perspective that will enable you to follow through with the change in your own life. Even though this eclipse could be quite emotional, it can help you make some really big changes, and it can do so in ways that could be actually fairly easeful. If you are a Capricorn, you may feel this eclipse in a positive, supportive, harmonious way. Same if you're a Taurus, but most especially if you are having a Pluto transit this year and your Capricorn birthday falls into these date spans, you stand to have an intense and yet helpful experience with this eclipse. Also, if you are having a Uranus transit to your Taurus sun and your birthday is shown here, the same. The Capricorn date is January 14th to the 19th. The Taurus date is May 12th to the 20th. Use the experience of the eclipse to help smooth out your Uranus paradigm shift or your Pluto death and rebirth experience. Find out more about this eclipse in my video about it. The link is in the description below. Well, there you have it. A look at the most significant sky events of September 2024. I hope you enjoyed Pandora's All Signs horoscope. If you got a zinger out of this, please tell me about it in the comments below. Please like this video and share it with all your friends. If you want a real reading with a real professional astrologer, you can find me at this URL. And if you want to learn more about astrology, check out this page for upcoming workshops. And I'll see you around the cosmos. Bye-bye.